In this video, I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite succulent style plants, aloe, how to care for it, how to propagate it, and how to rescue it if it's looking not so good. Aloe is a really versatile type of succulent style plant. There's lots of different varieties. It comes in lots of different shapes and sizes and colors. I believe it is native to South Africa, that region. Most aloes are kind of recognizable with their kind of rounded spiral shape and spikes. They come in lots of different colors, but they aren't all necessarily rounded and spiky. Some, like this fan aloe, come in different shapes. It's probably most well known in aloe vera format, which has really wonderful function of the gel which comes out of the leaf, has wonderful healing properties. I personally don't have any aloe vera myself, but I have lots of other kinds of aloe. Their care is pretty much universal, the same across the board. This being a succulent style plant, it does like the warmth, it does like it dry. It's almost like a desert style plant, so think of its care that way. They are not frost resistant, so if they do get frozen or frosty, the gel, which does reside in these nice squidgy leaves, that will freeze, and that does often kill the plant if it gets too cold. So if you are in a location that does get cold or frosty, you will want to make sure you bring it in the wintertime. What I really love about this plant is it's super versatile and it propagates so easily. You can get a lot of plants from one plant, and they're actually pretty easy to rescue should you need to do that. So I'm going to do a couple things here. I'm going to show you, this is an aloe I got in the clearance bin, and one of the reasons I thought this was such a great deal is if you look at this, there's actually multiple plants in this one pot. So rather than just buying one aloe, I've actually got a whole collection. I will take this apart and show you exactly what I mean. So in this plant, as you can see, there are many what we call pups. Now aloe is a kind of pupping style succulent propagation, which means when it does bloom, it does have flowers and it does seed, but one of the main ways that it creates more babies is by shooting off what we call pups. So if you take a look here, all of these are new little plant pups. So I could just plant this straight in the ground as it is, or I could also go in and pull out these pups separately. So look how easily that just comes straight apart. And there we go. That is a whole new plant that can be grown separately. You can actually see once it shoots off these little pups, the roots come out of the stem. They're very straightforward plant, if you ask me. So that you can see it's got some roots here, but the roots just do come right out of the stem here. So even if you didn't have it in a pot, if you had that planted in the ground and you're not going to lift the whole thing up, you could very easily come in with, say, clippers. So here's another example of what you could do if this was in the ground like this. So you could even come and find the stem similar to this. You can pull off all these dead leaves to get a better feel on things. I could come up to a plant, clip it off like this, and even though this is nice and raw, this could just be planted straight in as it is. I would probably remove the lower leaves, and you can actually even see where this pup is pupping. You remove these lower leaves, roots will just come straight out of there. And so there's multiple ways to get pups like that. So like most succulents though, they are prone to rot. So if you were to do this, and actually you can see where a root would come out. That's like a little root bud. And if I even pull this further, I feel like you can kind of see even more of the spots that roots will eventually form out of this thing. Being a succulent, it is prone to rot if it gets overly moist. So if you were to chop a stem like this in order to propagate it, you'll want to dry this off, callus it over. I would leave it a day or two, if not longer. They will survive without roots for a very long time. That is the beauty of succulents with their nice moisture laden leaves. These leaves retain so much moisture. This can stay out of the ground for a month or more. Absolutely. So I've cut that. I would set that aside and plant it up in probably a week's time is what I would do, to be really sure that that has calloused over and there's no moist edges that could be prone to rot when planted. Now this piece that I broke off first, there is also a little wet piece there, so you might want to leave that a day or two, but this is actually less likely to rot because it's already pupped out with roots growing. But that's just two very simple methods on propagating this plant. Now, as mentioned, aloe vera is the aloe that is most commonly known for its wonderful gel properties in the leaves. This is not an aloe vera. I'm not even sure what kind of aloe this is. This is a Aloe Crosby's prolific, and it is indeed prolific with all these babies. Obviously this one, this variety in particular, is known for growing lots of little babies. Now, this leaf would also have a little bit of gel in it, but I have heard that you might want to be a little bit cautious with other varieties of aloe. They might be skin irritating, so don't just go and cut any aloe and expect to like use it as face cream. You probably do want to make sure that you have a true aloe vera before you do that. So for me, I'm just going to throw these leaves away. One other good question is, many succulents can grow pups from leaf only. Here's like a good example. I have some just here. So this is a little, probably a Graptivaria succulent leaf, and see it's growing a little pup from the leaf. Do aloe do that? I have seen some YouTube videos where people have done that, but the rate in which that happens is very low. So would I waste my time trying to propagate these leaves? No, I'm just going to put these in the compost bin. So I talked about different types of aloe and how to propagate them, but what to do if you have an aloe that is not doing really well, or you've found it, or you need to rescue it. Here's some simple steps with how to rescue an aloe. This is a fan aloe that was my mother's, and she had it in a pot that got completely waterlogged. These are desert plants, and they do want to be in really well draining sandy soil, and this particular fan aloe was in a pot and the drainage got blocked, so it was completely waterlogged. It was really soggy. You can't really tell now, but this was just completely squishy. So she said, "Oh, I'm just throwing that away, it's dying." Well, I'm always up for a challenge, so I said, let me take a look at that. I took it home and I just set it here in my propagation station here, and actually honestly forgot about it for over a month. In that month it dried out. I made sure to keep it out of any moisture. It was out of any direct sunlight. It was in a bright area. It was outdoors, but it was no direct sunlight. And the stem, which you can see where the damage was, the stem did dry up, but this is where the moisture had done the damage, and it just sealed itself off and started rooting on its own. So you know, I would remove these bottom leaves, and this thing will quite happily, probably really wants to get into the soil, because you can see now that it's been out of the soil for a while, some of the leaves are starting to lose their water. It's hasn't been watered in, as mentioned, over a month. So the leaves are getting a little bit wrinkly and flat. If you see an aloe and it does start to have its leaves shrivel up a little bit, that does mean that it does need to get some water. But overall, let's just remove this one for more aesthetic purposes. But this plant will live on. So in the case of this plant, it was okay. I could tell that the rot was subsiding, and it was fully drying out. But in some cases you might want to, if you have a stem that is rotting, you might want to cut at least an inch or two above the rot and make sure it gets fully dry so that the rot doesn't get inside the plant. This one was just lucky, it just stopped on its own. But that's another method if you have a plant that is rotting. And just be sure that you water them only when the soil is completely dry or when they look kind of a little bit wrinkly like this. This is another aloe that I found on the ground, and it was in the middle of a sidewalk. I'd say it was part of landscaping. It was at a hotel. I didn't see any aloes nearby, so I don't know what had happened, but yeah, it was just sitting in the sidewalk right like that. So I picked it up and I brought it home, and it's also been actually several months and I haven't done anything to this. So for me, so like for this one, I would just simply place it into some nice cactus mixed soil. And for this one, the same, just remove any of these kind of dry leaves down the bottom. That'll kind of help the plant get some new roots out to help establish itself, to kind of trigger it to know, oh, there's some soil, there's some moisture here, and I can go and root myself again. And in the case of this, you can see all these little pups hanging out. I'm actually gonna pull apart some of these pups, and they just pull off pretty easily. Don't need the clippers, but the clippers can be helpful. So these are all the roots that were on this plant, and this one looks intact, but the rest of them are kind of all dried up. So I'm just gonna remove those. These plants root so easily. This also still has some little baby pups in here, but these are so small, I'm gonna keep those attached. I'm not gonna pull them off. But from that little plant found on the sidewalk, I've actually now got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we got 7 plants out of that one. So for me to now repot this, I simply got some really nice gritty cactus mix. Cactus mix is soil that doesn't have too much organic material. You'll notice there's a lot of like sandy material. It could either be perlite or sometimes other kind of like lava rock, other puffed up materials that really allow for water to drain through really well. And again, you'll want to make sure that you have a pot with really good drainage so that they don't sit in standing water, because that's what happened to this one. It ended up getting rot. And we really want to make sure that that doesn't happen again. So just checking it for pests. Sometimes the stems of these can get mealy bugs, but it looks okay. So pretty simply, just fill my pot with this nice cactus mixed soil. Make a mess as usual, and I've filled it pretty high because the stem is pretty hard. I can just pop that in there, and you'll notice this fan aloe in particular, I think it had been on a bigger plant and grown sideways, but I'm gonna kind of put it in there, making sure the roots are nicely in contact with the soil. And this type of aloe can actually grow pretty tree-like. Some aloes grow very, very tall. Some are even actual trees. You can have an aloe tree. Some are kind of almost more like climbing plants. I have some climbing aloe in the yard. Some get this really lovely structural shape and color. Aloe Cameronii in particular. Oh my gosh, there's lots of ants here, and I bet they're in my soil, so I don't really want ants to take up residence in here because the ants can sometimes be a vector for mealybugs, so hopefully they'll get out of here. But I'll put that aside, and I would just do the similar thing with these, plant them up. This is another nursery pot with drainage, some cactus mix, and yeah, I would just pop that in there like that. Just for now, I might put these in here with it while I'm just trying to get them somewhat established. You know what, actually, I'm gonna plant this in my garden. I'm gonna set that aside, and I'm just gonna plant up all these smaller ones. So that's all you really need to do. Just literally place them into the soil, and they will begin rooting themselves. This aloe in particular, I think it's more of a bushy aloe, not a tree, tall growing aloe. So these plants will want it warm. They do want a lot of light. So here's another aloe that I have called an aloe pink. You'll see some of the leaves are really pink, and like a lot of succulents, the color of the aloe is brought on by its exposure to the sun. When this gets a lot more sun, I've had this kind of in the shade and it's pretty moist at the moment, so it has gone very green, but it should have more sunlight, and that will bring out the nice beautiful pink color. Aloe Cameronii is another good example. It goes really nice and red when it has a lot of direct heat and sunlight, more stress really, honestly. And I have heard of some people that cut their Cameroniis to lose their roots, because once they start getting a lot of moisture, like in the wintertime here in California, we get a lot more rain, and if they're planted in the yard, they start to go green. And so I know some people, they will cut them and replant them, forcing them to get stressed out and reroot themselves to get that nice red color again. However, I should warn you, like most succulents, if your plants are not used to being in hot direct sunlight, so this has been in the shade for a little bit, if I put this into like a very hot direct sun, it could get sunburned, and when leaves are sunburned, they're pretty much permanently damaged. So it won't necessarily kill it, but it can do some more permanent damage to the leaves. So you just want to be a little bit careful with that, to ease them into the sun, to ease them into the bright spot. But they really do very well with hot, direct, bright sunshine. So in my garden, I have a lot of different types of aloes. These are much smaller. I mean, when I say small, they're big, but they do not grow tall. And then they grow lots of little pups out the side like that. So they're kind of great as border plants because they go across like that. They get a kind of a nice red color when they're stressed. This is an Aloe Cameronii. It gets this really lovely red color, and they can grow quite big, and they also grow a lot of pups. These are other aloe types, and you'll just notice sometimes they just grow tall and get really, really bushy. And that's really common for aloes to behave like this. And then this is almost a much taller, I wouldn't even call it a tree aloe. Here's the same kind. These aloes grow really tall, and then I've noticed they tend to then fall over, as you can see here. Here's another one. And then lots of little babies come out where they have fallen. more babies, so they can get really big and really out of control. And the same type of aloe I had here, it fell over. You can see where I cut it, and then it just continues growing all of these babies. So they're really cool landscape plants. And one of my favorite things about aloes is almost all of them get these wonderful torch style flowers. Here's another type of aloe. Right now it's November, so most of the blooms are gone, but this one, we do have one bloom still here. You can see where almost all of these, all those sticks, at certain times of year, they had really big, lovely blooms. And they come in all different, usually reds or yellows. Right, that is right there. And that's called an aloe blue elf. They make kind of really cute orange blooms. The pollinators, particularly hummingbirds, just absolutely love these. But right now, for the time of year that it is in my yard, here's some more of those really tall ones. The blooms have gone. On this side of my yard, I have more of these more short aloes, and these have not been watered much, and you can see they are curling in and the leaves are looking kind of dry. So I need to give them a really good soak. Same with these. This is what a thirsty aloe looks like. And then this aloe got sunburned. So we had another bush hanging out over the yard here, and this was like completely covered. I cut the bush out and it got sunburned, so it'll survive. It just probably needs a really good soak and to get used to the sun again. Over here is my pile of aloes that I need to plant. So I've ignored them for a while, but they will absolutely survive. As you can see, they've been out of the ground for a while. But all I need to do is peel back these leaves, place it in the ground. Here's some more sunburn damage on this Aloe cameronii, but it'll come back to life. And that is it. That is my aloe growing guide. If you have any questions, please do pop them in the comments below. I'm always happy to answer any questions you might have. I'm also on Instagram and TikTok, and of course subscribe.